Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo and the always obnoxious thorn in my side, Anthony LaPanta.
Obnoxious? Why? Because I was on time for the 77th show in a row?
Yeah, you're good at that. But today was just, you never, I always have to confirm that Anthony knows, one, that there's a podcast, but two, the time and the site. But last night, as Kevin Gore could attest, was second to none. Where I said, we have a podcast tomorrow night, and you're like, live? And I'm like, yeah. Where? Elsie's. And right away, I could actually see for the first time he's actually been bothered. And then he reveals that not only does he have a 3:20 tea time, but it's in another state.
It's all valid.
Yeah.
I did have a 3:20 tea time in Hudson. And I thought the show was tomorrow night, so I did know we had a show this week. I was just off by a night. I actually was the one who asked to push the tea time back because the Wild pushed practice back from 11 to 12. So I called the guys I was going to play with and said, hey, hate to be a pain. Any chance we can push our 2 o'clock tea time back to 3:20? They obliged, and then about 4 hours later, I had to get back to them and say, hey, wait a minute. Can I just bail altogether on this tea time? Because it turns out I got a show to do with Russo.
But you didn't bail. You just played 9 holes?
No, I bailed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was going to play 9, and then I just told them, if you can find somebody else who can play 18, play. Yeah. So I bailed altogether. I was going to play the front 9 until about noon today, and then they said they found somebody else.
So today at practice, I go to him like, have you pushed your tee time up? And he's like, no, I'm seeing if I could play 9. I'm like, you're not seeing if you can play 9. You are playing 9. Like, this is not an option. You're in Wisconsin playing golf. It is not fast to drive on I-94 these days. We all know
quick.
that.
I'm quick.
Yeah. And I'm like, you are playing 9 and you're getting to the pod on time.
I told them that if they could find somebody else to play 18, go ahead. And if they needed me to play 9, I would. And what time was practice today? Noon. So maybe it was about 1 o'clock probably. They texted me and said, we found somebody else. So I was off the hook. I
didn't even get to leave practice till like 3 because they had, I think, their drug test today and a meeting and all that stuff. And so wound up writing after practice and coming down here to work. And now actually I'm going to meet Joe Smith, my colleague, to work again after the show. So a lot of stories coming in the athletic.
The grind is real for you.
It is real. So you know what? While you're out golfing every day, I'm actually writing. These stories don't magically write itself. Anyway, you see what I mean? It's obnoxious.
If you guys had any idea how hard it is to be Michael Russo,
it is
unbelievable.
Yeah. He just shows up. He doesn't even put on makeup for these games. Like other people at least prep by putting on a face. You just come out with your golf suntan and all that stuff.
Yeah, we got harassed about that a little bit from the Chicago broadcasters last night. Look, I'm not the only one. Ryan Carter spent a little time in the sun this summer too. Yeah. So the Blackhawks announcers came into our booth last night, and I actually didn't know that they had hired Rick Ball from Calgary, who's one of the best play-by-play guys in the league. And I knew that Chris Vosters wasn't coming back, but I didn't know he had been the replacement. And all of a sudden I saw him, and this guy's been I think maybe the last 10 years, he's been the TV voice of the Calgary Flames. He's done some Hockey Night in Canada stuff. And when I saw him, I said, you can't tell me Canadian national TV is doing a Wild Blackhawks preseason game. And said, no, I'm in Chicago now. And then all of a sudden he looked at Ryan Carter and I and he said, well, this might be the tannest broadcast team in the National Hockey League right now. And Darren Pang was standing next to him and he said, well, give it about a month. And he said, nobody will even recognize him. Yeah. And which is true.
And by the way, nobody plays more golf than Darren. So for him to be judging you right now, and that says everything that you're not exactly putting on your suntan.
I shouldn't be judged.
Lotion. No, you shouldn't. All right, October 30th is our next live show. That is at SplitRock.
I did work 85 Twins games this year. It isn't like I took the summer off like some of the bloggers covering the Wild.
All right, that's valid. Again, October 30th, our next live show at SplitRock. It's the day we get back from Pittsburgh. So we'll have a lot to talk about on that show because the Wild will be 9 games into the regular season, 7 in a row on the road. As usual at the end of training camp, everything's so positive. So for your sake as fans, hopefully that show is as positive. And that means that they've gotten off to a really good start after what I think is a really good camp. And then we'll have 2 shows in November right now. We think the dates are the 4th and the 13th. We'll just let you know the sites settle in a little bit. Actually, we don't think the dates are the 4th and 13th. They must be the 4th and 13th.
They're either the 4th and the 13th, or you and I won't be there.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you look at our November schedule, there's very little flexibility for when we could do live shows. So those will be the dates. It's just a matter of where they are. You can come on in if you're somebody's knocking on the door if you want to let them in. Anyway. See, Alex, you already got.
Do you have to have like a password to get into the show tonight or something?
You need a card. Apparently, you can't even go to the bathroom at these shows. You get locked out.
How dare you get up and leave during the middle of the show?
Yeah, exactly. We're like a stand-up comics. If you leave, we're going to be judging you and heckling you from the stage. Really cool things. We have a bunch of giveaways here. If you're listening at home, we have a Brock Faber jersey that we're going to be giving away at some point in December or January. For every live show that you come to, you can register. So if you come to 4 or 5 shows before we give away the jersey, you could sign up 4 or 5 times. And then at the end of the show, everybody here in attendance got a raffle ticket. If you didn't, come on up and see our producer, Alex. But we have an autographed Ryan Hartman picture and also a Kirill Kaprizov bobblehead. So really cool giveaways tonight that we'll be giving away at the end of the show. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before the show, Anthony showed up at 6:59:30. The third giveaway was going to be a $100 fine that was going to go to one of you lucky people. But as usual, he aggravated me by actually showing up on time.
The only fines that should be assessed for late arrivals is you. We've proven that.
No.
Whenever you're late, you say it was a soft time.
Yes, like
when
if
we're going to record in my
house,
kitchen and you show up a half hour late, it was a soft time.
Yeah.
When I show up on time every time, by God, if you had been 30 seconds later, I was going to fine you.
Well, because if we have 40 people that you're inconveniencing. When I'm late to your house, I'm inconveniencing you, Phil, and Margot. Stanley doesn't care. So anyway, so like that's
so it's a soft time when you're late. It's a hard time.
Yeah, because
if there ever comes a day where I'm late.
If we're advertising at 7 o'clock.
I even texted you the other day because I thought I might be late, and I still showed up at the same time you did.
Yeah, that was annoying too. So anyway, yeah, that one was actually unbelievable. Like, what are the chances? He and I are coming from like opposite sides of the town. You were coming from your big golf with out in Windsong, and I was coming from downtown Minneapolis, and somehow and of course he went to Kowalski's and bought a bunch of stuff, and then
and showed up exactly on time.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about training camp, Anthony. I guess let's start with this. And you never know, right? But I kind of alluded to the fact that I think they've had a really good camp. And John Hines has been, actually, I just thought of a funny story that I'll tell, but John Hines has been talking a lot in the last week about how he's really tried to push these guys to the limits. And we have seen very hard practices, very long practices. And I think this week he's obviously going to try to start to pull back a little bit to get them, make sure they're fresh for the regular season.
Well, he didn't today.
No, that is true. And I was talking to Bill Guerin about it today, and Bill said a lot of it is this 7-game road trip. He wants these guys just mentally and physically conditioned for this trip. But a lot of players, a lot of the North American players have told me this is the hardest camp they've ever had. So yesterday I'm in the locker room, morning before the game, I'm talking to Kirill Kaprizov for this story that I'm working on with him. And I brought that up to him, and he just started laughing and rolled his eyes. And he basically said, he's like, yeah, everybody keeps on saying that. I'm like, try playing in Russia. And he told me in training camp, first of all, training camp here in the NHL, CBA, is 18 days. When I started covering the league, it was like 28 days.
They played like 13 preseason games.
Yeah, it wasn't that much, but it was a long camp.
There were some teams who played 12 or 13. I went back. We were talking to Darryl Ray down in Dallas, and he said, we played 13, and I had a teammate who played all 13 one time because he showed up out of shape.
Yeah.
So I went to fact check it just because I was curious if he was exaggerating.
What year would that have been by any shape? Like in the 90s or 80s?
I think it was the late 80s.
Okay.
Late 80s, early 90s. But the bottom line, I went back and looked, and he was absolutely right. They played 12 or 13 like 5 years in a row.
I don't remember that many when I was started covering the league, but I remember a lot. Like I remember going to places like Charlotte and Louisville and Huntsville and Pensacola.
Well, even the Wild's early years, they played 9 most years.
But the one interesting thing, like they're only 18 days, and so I guess my point is that like and I was telling Damon Hunt this today, like you guys really don't know, like it used to be 28-day camps, and the one thing I always remember about those camps is that it was so many days that you actually would spend your first week as a beat writer writing about the prospects because you had to write about people before they were going to be sent down. Here, you don't even really write about the prospects because they're sent down almost immediately. But the other thing is like I look at this as not being a big deal. Like this is just what their jobs are. But Kirill Kaprizov told me that they used to, that in the KHL, you have a training camp for like a month and a half. You show up at the rink in the morning, you have, you would go on the ice, you work out, you run, then you have breakfast, then you do another workout, then you have lunch, and then in the afternoon, I might be getting the time off, and then you have more on the ice. So you're doing 2-a-days. You're at the rink from before breakfast, basically, until mid-afternoon, and it lasts a month and a half. So he's like, this is not a hard camp.
No, but it has been different. Yeah. And there have been a couple things that I think have been subtle. And John Hines yesterday, when we talked to him, or actually I guess it was 2 days ago before the game day. No, it was yesterday, the game day against Chicago. And he put it into term. He said, I believe this is a second chance league. So therefore, everything we've tried to do this camp has been to emphasize that. So every time whether it's a rush drill where there's a shot on the goalie, we want a second shot to come. If it's a puck in the corner, we want a second puck to appear. Whatever the drill, they want a second effort element to the play because he termed it a second effort league. And he said, we want to be the best second effort team in the league this year. And I think as he said it, I started to kind of reflect back on the drills I've watched. And even today then, as we were watching the drills, it became really evident that that was the point of almost every drill. It's a 2-on-1 entry, but then the goalie's got to make a second save on a puck from a trailer. It's a 2-on-1 entry, but then the defenseman gets a second puck that he's got to make a play to get it out of the zone. So there's always a second effort element to the drill. And I think it's been a great camp. I really do. And there wasn't a lot to be learned in terms of who was going to make the team, where guys were going to fit in the lineup. Most of that, as we came into camp, was locked, other than maybe a couple guys that had a chance to open eyes. But yet, I do think even for the veteran guys, it's been a camp that has been we're going to push it to the limit to find out if you're ready for opening night. Because Billy Guerin joined us on the broadcast last night, and when we asked him what the biggest key was to make this year different than last, he said, we have to have a better start. And the 7-game road trip's a big part of that.
And let's talk about just what you said about locked rosters. The one thing is, Jesper Wallstedt is obviously still here. I think it's extremely clear that he's going to be here more often than he's in Iowa this year. He's going to be shuttling back and forth. I think he's basically going to be based here. Then when he goes there, living in a hotel. So he's he's part of this roster, whether on opening night he isn't or not. Damon Hunt's had a really good camp. He's still here. I'm like, how you doing? He was like, I'm doing great. Like again, because he's still here. And you start recognizing the tea leaves, and he's now realizing that whether he's here on opening night or not, he is extremely close to being on this team, whether it's an injury or at some point they're probably going to either waive John Merrill or trade John Merrill. And then Ben Jones is here. Ben is somebody that is vying for either the 13th forward spot or at some point going to be sent to Iowa, but he's clearly going to be probably a first call-up option. And then Liam Ogren's still here. I still think that he is probably starting in Iowa, but he's had a couple really good games in a row.
He has. Prior to that, I thought his camp was mediocre. And he was one of the guys who came to camp with the opportunity. I know we've had this conversation so many times, we don't need to revisit it. You've made the point about signing veteran guys blocks the path of these guys. And I've always said, if the young guy is better, they're going to figure out a way to make him fit. And
no.
They will. They absolutely will.
Let me just tell you, right now, Liam Ogren would be better than Marcus Johansson.
If Liam Ogren had come to camp and outplayed Marcus Johansson, he would be in that spot.
He would
be on the second line without a doubt.
No.
And he just would. He absolutely would. But he hasn't outplayed Marcus Johansson yet. If he does this year, he will be there, and Johansson won't. I'll guarantee you that. And we saw Ogren last night get a chance to play in what was Matt Boldy's spot and will be Matt Boldy's spot on that line. And I talked to John about it yesterday morning and just said, and he said he's got to prove that he's better. Now, if he is better, he will be in that spot, and that second line will be Ogren,
What has
Eriksson,
Marcus
and
Johansson
Boldy.
done at all in camp that makes you think that Liam Ogren wouldn't just right now be better than him?
Matt, Liam Ogren hasn't done enough to show me that he's better than Marcus Johansson. So
at some point you got to play these guys. And I'm writing about this next week. We had an interview with Craig Leopold a couple days ago.
But Michael, you've said this for 3 years. You got to play these guys.
I'm just telling you right now that Craig, the staff wants these guys to play this year. Right. And right now, Marcus Johansson's in the spot that they'd like to have.
And if he's better, he will take the spot. And if he's not better, he won't.
Alex, get ready. That is.
No, it is.
It is absolutely
That's
baloney.
Absolutely what you've told me. And so when Murat Husnudinov came, he's a legit NHL player, but at no point has his path been blocked by a veteran. He hasn't played better than any of them. And Liam Ogren this year has not, in this camp, has not played better than the veteran guys in front of him. And I believe he will be. I think he will be a better player than Marcus Johansson is right now at some point in his career. But right now, he hasn't shown it yet. So if Ogren does it, and if he grabs it, and when given the opportunity, all of those other players we just talked about are just hang on for a second.
Let me just interrupt you while you're filibustering here. I am telling you right now, that they want Liam Ogren on this team and cannot, because of their cap situation, because of him. I know this to be true. Okay.
I know to be true that they would would have wanted him to have outplayed these guys and take the job, and he didn't.
There have been many, many times in the history of this team where young kids have come in here and played better and still started in the minors.
And this year is not one of them right now for Liam Ogren. I believe that they believe the upside of Liam Ogren is higher than the upside of Marcus Johansson. I believe that it is. For sure it is. He will be more than a 40-point NHL player in his prime. But right now, this camp, he has not outplayed Johansson. I believe that.
But again, like you're talking about, like Johansson's done anything in camp.
He hasn't.
The point is that right now, upside, if you had Ogren on the team, that you would get more production out of him, you would get more everything out of him. That's just
but what I know is what I'm going to get from Marcus Johansson. He's going to score 40 points. He's going to be fine. He's not going to be anything special. He's not going to be an all-star.
Speaking of Johansson, how shocked were you? And I don't think it's a coincidence how physical he was in yesterday's game.
Yeah, I believe this year Marcus Johansson knows. He sees Liam Ogren. He also knows it's the last year of his contract. We saw it 2 years ago. The stretch he had at the end of the season, the year they acquired him in 2020, was spring of 22. That line was the highest scoring line in the NHL with Boldy, and Eriksson. So I believe right now we might see a motivated, and I don't mean to say that like he wasn't motivated last year, but just a different player. He knows he needs a big year this year to get one more contract. I believe he'll start in that spot with Boldy and Eriksson. And if he doesn't produce, Liam Ogren will be there in a very short time. And if Ogren gets that chance, he better run with it, because we saw all those other guys. And all these players are the players that we kept looking at saying, well, when's he? Adam Beckman got chances and never ran with it. Sammy Walker got chances and never ran with it. Vinny Lettieri got chances and never ran with it. And those guys are not the prospect level that Liam Ogren is. But when he gets that chance, he better take advantage of it and say, don't give it back. And if Ogren comes up here and he gets that opportunity, are you going to tell me that if all of a sudden, let's just say Marcus Johansson's banged up for a night and he plays with Boldy and Eriksson and he picks up 2 points that night, that the next night they're going to say, okay, you're going back to Iowa, Marcus Johansson's in here? Absolutely not. If he's better than him, he will play there. I asked Billy this on the air last night, and I said, we've been talking about these young players all the time. He said, look, when I was playing in Edmonton, Glenn Sather came and said, if you want Wayne Gretzky's job, I'll give it to you, but you have to take it. And he said, no, obviously nobody could take Wayne Gretzky's job, and we're not talking about Gretzky here, but he said, if you want the guy's job, outplay him and take it. We will never keep a player on the roster if somebody else is better than him. And so name the player that's better that right now is sitting on the side.
First of all, it's beyond naive that you think that NHL teams, I've covered the league for 30 years.
Do you think Liam Ogren outplayed Marcus Johansson to the point in this camp?
100%.
You think, so what would you do?
I'm saying there is nothing you could do. Why? Because Marcus Johansson is blocking Liam Ogren's ability right now to play in that spot.
Make him be your 13th forward and play Liam Ogren.
Well, I would do that in a minute.
That's what I asked. What would you do? And I'm saying I wouldn't. I would say...
Again, Volstad is on the team. It absolutely lowers their cap space.
It doesn't limit you. If Ogren was better, then send Damon Hunt to Iowa.
Well, Damon Hunt's going up.
I know. Send him to Iowa, waive John Merrill, and play Liam Ogren. If you think he's been that much better, that's what they would do. If he was better, they would have done that. He wasn't. He played better last night, but even last night, I thought he was good against Winnipeg. I thought he was terrible in Dallas. He was good against Winnipeg. He was good last night. It isn't like he scored 4 points last night. It wasn't like he dominated the game. There were 7 forwards who were better than him on the Wild's roster, let alone on his. So, I mean, it's just, he was no different than Marcus Johansson last night. Johansson had good chances, so did Ogren. Neither one of them scored. If Ogren had scored 3 points last night, I think we'd be having a very different conversation.
Again, there is, if the point of when I use the word block is that at some point you have to play these kids on here.
When they earn it, they will play it.
It's absolutely a fallacy. The whole when they earn it. You see teams all around the league.
Michael, you told me 2 years ago that Marco Rossi was being blocked, and I said he's got to prove it. He's got to earn it. He's got to prove it. Last year he proved it. He earned it. He played with Kaprizov and Zuccarello for a big chunk of the year. He scored 21 goals. He's now in the NHL. He's likely to get some opportunities between those guys again because he earned it.
All right,
his spot wasn't blocked. He had to take it from somebody. And it took a while.
Again, and you'll read all this next week. When Craig Leopold, what he wants this year and what is the plan this year is for these kids that they need to know right now in their plan whether or not they can play.
Absolutely.
The only way you could have it is by putting them in the lineup. Hey, it's Russo for Aquarius Home Services. You know, I spent all day at the arena the other day. I didn't bring my jacket when I went to lunch, and I was absolutely freezing walking down the streets of 7th, and it reminded me that the chill in the air is just a warning. Old man winter is coming, and you need to make sure that your furnace is up for the challenge. For just $29, Aquarius will come out and evaluate your system with their Furnace Peak Performance Check. It's like a health check for your home's heart. Don't wait for the first icy blast. Stay cozy warm and schedule your $29 Furnace Peak Performance Check at AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended, and don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
Get $250 when you switch to a Royal Credit Union checking account. Switch to Royal's Smart Checking account and enjoy no monthly fees or minimum balance, free mobile check deposits, and surcharge-free access to over 40,000 ATMs nationwide. Getting your $250 is easy. Open your Royal Checking account by October 19, receive 2 payroll direct deposits, and you'll receive $250. See details and open your account today at rcu.org/checking bonus. Insured by NCUA.
All right. Hey, and that's going to happen. So the point, so Spurgeon, I mean, last night, it's just amazing to me that he just never, ever looks different. You know,
we talked about that on the broadcast last night. He and Brodin, how many times have they come back from injury? And the first shift, the first game back, they look like they haven't missed a step.
Yeah.
Because of how well they skate.
Yeah. And hopefully that his health continues to be, the one thing with the injuries that he's had, he's going to have, treatment after a lot of games. I've joked with him. I'm like, that's going to be a great excuse. When he doesn't talk to media, I was like, oh, yeah, just make him wait. I got to get my treatment. But to that point, I mean, a couple goals, and just, I thought really quality defensively, looked as young as ever, and so hopefully that'll continue.
Yeah, they have
banging bodies in a preseason game.
And I asked Ryan Carter. You probably didn't see our show. Well, obviously, you didn't listen to the show last night. But I asked Ryan Carter during the broadcast, which I thought was interesting to hear what he said, because so many times in preseason games, you're talking about guys finding their game, getting enough puck touches, getting enough opportunity, enough shifts together, enough power plays. And I said, what about the guys that are the physical guys, the guys that have to get that part of their game up to speed? Because there is a difference. There's an intensity that's different in a regular season than a preseason game. And even the guys whose role is to get under guys' skin, I said, you have to get your smack talk up to regular season form. And Carts kind of laughed. He said, you do, because you don't have that edge, so you have to try to create it, but yet you're walking the line that your role is for 82 games, not for tonight. So where in a regular season game, there's going to be a next level that you get to. In the preseason, you try to simulate it. You try to push yourself to that spot. But it's hard for those guys because you aren't typically going into the corner at the same speed you are next Thursday night. So that part was interesting. But I think Foligno set a good example last night. Like, this is how we're going to play. And he looks great in camp. I think when you were talking about the defenseman, though,
such good shape, by the way. Him and Kaprizov,
terrific shape. Yeah, and really all the guys that they talked about, that we've talked about during the summer, that they asked to go get themselves more ready to come back to camp this year, have all done it.
Yeah,
everybody all those guys look
Hartman,
different right
Wallstedt,
now.
Gustafsson,
Rossi has added more muscle and looks faster. But just to wrap up your thought on the defenseman, what I think is really interesting is that with how good Spurgeon has looked, and I asked John about this the other day because early in camp they played favor with Middleton, and that to me was the indication that they wanted to at least start with Brodin and Spurgeon together. And he said, we've thought about that, but we've also thought about going back to what's always worked with Brodin and Faber and then Spurgeon and Middleton. So I think they got a lot of flexibility with those top four guys. And Damon Hunt has shown, I think, that if there's a spot in the top four, like if somebody goes down, I don't think it would be to break up Chisholm and Bogosian. I think Hunt would be a guy that would jump in there with how he has shown. His skating just looks different this year to me.
Oh, he's
looked really good. So I think he'd be a guy that would likely jump into that top four spot. I think they really like Chisholm and Bogosian as a third set, 12, 14 minutes. Chisholm on the power play, Bogosian on the kill. I think that's a perfect third set.
Yeah, and to your point, I think I've mentioned this a couple times that there's a chance Middleton might have to come back from the road trip because his wife is due, and Hunt I think would clearly be the guy, maybe over even just throwing John Merrill into the lineup for that very reason. Foligno, I was thinking about this yesterday because during the game because veterans. There is a code in these preseason games where the veterans expect that the kids are not going to go after them, hit hard, all that stuff. And I just thought it was hilarious yesterday watching Foligno just step into this game and just, going after guys like Kuchenski at like 20 years old but he hadn't played since what was it, February, March was his last game. And, it was his first preseason game. So he wants to get himself into game action. But it's always fascinating against any team that his brother's on because you could just see like these guys Murphy last night wanted to kill Foligno at one point, and but
those guys only play the game one way.
Yeah.
It's hard to shut it off.
No, absolutely, and he's got to, again from his standpoint, you're not doing it in practice. It's been a physical camp, but they're not doing that in practice. So for a guy that's coming off core muscle surgery, he needs to test himself. And so you just knew last night that he was going to be throwing his body around, and man, did he. The Marc-Andre Fleury prank was hilarious just from the standpoint that so we talked to Flower today on how it all came about, and it was some equipment guys yesterday sort of dared him to do it. He went home, got the mustache and the hair and all that stuff. But it happened during the first TV timeout, as you guys captured on Bally's, and he actually went by the bench and basically chirped the bench and said, wake up, guys, you're down by one. And if you are like, who the hell is this guy chirping us? And somebody apparently is like, is that Flower? And then everybody's like hilarious. But then what do they do? Because remember that TV timeout was late. It was like, they had two in a row really quick. And then Freddie Gaudreau, his best buddy on the team, goes out and ties the game up. It's kind of fitting.
There's only Fleury could do that.
Yeah.
And somehow they got word to Kevin Gorg to watch for it. And so that's how we captured it on TV.
I know who told Gorg.
And it was great. And the things that he's done around the rink, those are the kind of moments that just, I think, are great for a team because they remind everybody that, yes, we're here to try to win. We're here to work our ass off when the puck drops and right up to the final horn. But let's also have some fun while we're doing it. And all of that stuff is real. None of it is done for show. None of it is done for the cameras. In fact, he didn't even want anybody to know about it.
Yeah.
And
that's what he said this morning.
Right. And that's the best part about it. So these practical jokes and everything, they're all just done for his own entertainment. They're not done for the general public. The fact that the general public hears about him is a bonus. But they're all done just because he genuinely loves coming to the rink and being one of the guys.
Yeah, we've definitely heard of like 4% of the thousands of things that he's done in his career, and that was another one where he wanted to be incognito about it, and it somehow got to Bally's. But to your point about being so genuine, like even today, they had the meeting. They did the drug test, and then all of a sudden Fleury comes out to talk to us about the prank, and then I grabbed him on a couple other things. But even that, like I did this, The Athletic, we always do these anonymous polls with everybody in the league, and so we're now doing that where we throw 7 questions at every single player, and then we group it together, and suddenly in November we'll have a poll with 600 opinions. And even his today, I mean, these things are usually like take a minute, right? But today, he just leans against the essentially the TV area of the locker room at Tria, and he gave him 7 questions, and he answered every one in like 3 or 4 minutes. Like it was like next thing I know, like what should have been a minute poll is like 20 minutes on it, 7 questions. But again, it's because he's just so like nice. It's just he's so respectful of the job that we do and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think I saw you asking Ryan Hartman, and that probably lasted a minute and a half.
Yeah, that one. But that's how, in a lot of ways, that's how I wanted. Right. But you're right. You did see me doing it.
And his answers were all, he gave the answer, but he didn't expand on it.
Yeah, trust me. And we got 2 of these things, not NHL ones that we were doing during the regular season. And then I got the wild one so I want it to be short. But Flower today was interesting, some of his answers. What do you think of Jakub Trennin's camp so far?
Good. Yeah. Just fine. I really think
he's a big man.
He's a big man, but I was talking with Wes Walls today at practice a little bit, and it looks like Rossi's going to get a shot Friday night between Kaprizov and Zuccarello, and John Hines had told us all camp that both he and Hartman would get looks there. I still believe the team as a whole makes more sense. The lineup makes more sense if Rossi's between those 2 guys and Hartman's playing with Trennin and Foligno on a third line. And it isn't because Hartman couldn't play with the top 2 guys. It isn't because he wouldn't be better there, that those guys it's just, I think it makes more sense for both guys if Rossi produces there. And boy,
I think Rossi's going to have a big year.
I do too. And as soon as he was with those guys halfway through the second period last night when Hines made the change, it's amazing how many chances immediately popped up for him. Yeah. He's got a great sense for when to go to the net. He's willing to go to the net. He's got great hands. He had the deflection for a goal, had a couple other tips that resulted in good chances. I just think the lineup makes more sense there, but it's, as we've talked throughout the summer, what I like about this roster is it has a little more flexibility. So Rossi could play there, Hartman could play on the third line. If Hartman is going, you play him with Kaprizov and Zuccarello. Rossi's a responsible enough guy to play on the third line. Maybe even Eric Sinek plays there, and you let Rossi play with Boldy. If Johansson isn't going, you got Liam Ogren that can go there. Yeah, I even like Marcus Foligno with those 2 guys, as let Boldy and Eric Sinek play, and Foligno will go win pucks for him in the corner. I just think there's more guys. Marat Husnudinov, his skating ability, I think right now he's a 4th-line guy, but his skating ability in a pinch, he could move up in the lineup if he has to.
Can move up? I mean,
I don't think so,
really?
but I do think I love their 4th line's identity with Gaudreau, Husnudinov, and Lauko.
But do you think
maybe for a game or 2 here or there?
Eventually in his career,
I don't think so. I think he looks more like just a straight line. He's got good speed. He's physical, but I don't see a guy with the skill to be in the top 6.
But
maybe a third line winger.
The only thing I'll say is his goal last night and his goal in Dallas. He's got a shot.
He can shoot the puck. Yeah. I think he's in a perfect spot where he is right now. Now, if Jakub Trennin gets banged up and is out, Lauko could move up in that spot for a while. I don't see him as a top 6 guy. But I do think that the way the roster is built, you just have some guys that could move around. I like the fact that you've got guys like Reese Johnson and Jones that could be 3rd or 4th line guys. You've got guys like Ogren who could be either in your top 6 or your bottom 6, I believe, if you were missing a guy. I just think they have some more flexibility. You got a guy like Travis Boyd who I think could fit just about anywhere in your lineup in a short-term situation. So I think they've got more possibilities both from guys that can fill in for injuries, but also even within your lineup, just if guys are either not going that night or that week or a little bit beat up, they've got some guys that can move around. And I'm anxious to see how it works. I believe the way the lineup itself makes the most sense is what we saw today with Hartman playing with Foligno and Trennan and Rossi playing between Kaprizov and Zuccarello, but we'll see.
Yep, I agree with you. I think it works. And I think Hartman, he just fits on that line with the snarl. I would not want to play against that line. Lauco, if you didn't read my story in The Athletic the other day, I talked to Charlie Coyle for the story, and he had some freaking hilarious stuff to say for that story about just what this guy was like in the locker room in Boston and things like that.
Was it in your story that he talked about the fact that he's staying in Vinny Lettieri's house?
Yeah. He's living.
Or did I hear him on the radio say that?
No, he's living. Because they were Providence teammates, so they were flipped for each other. Then Vinny and him called each other and had a laugh. But this guy, he's willing to say anything. I mean, first of all, he found out about the trade. He was at an international film festival in Czechia, and he was 4 beers deep when Don Sweeney called him to tell him he was traded to Minnesota. So he's like, that was a funny conversation right there. But he's just he's an interesting cat, and he's not afraid of showing his personality. He brings a bag of grapes to games every day, and eats them before the game, during the game. He hands them out in the locker room. He puts vines in people's stalls, things like that. His whole left arm is tattooed. I don't remember if we
talked about this on a podcast or if it was when we were on one of our broadcasts, but I remember when we went to Boston last year. And before the game, I was talking with the Boston broadcasters. Mm-hmm. We always go talk to them about. Yeah, you
said it on the last podcast.
Where Jack Edwards said, "Hey, keep an eye on this kid. He brings a lot of speed, brings a lot of energy." And then, of course, that night
Well, you know what's really interesting about that night is that night he was cleared to fight for the first time because in Chicago last year he suffered a scary injury where a skate hit his left eye. He thought he lost his eye, bleeding everywhere. Missed a month, came back. He wasn't allowed to fight or do anything really physical wearing the cage. Gets it off. He's got a bunch of UFC buddies coming to the game that night in Boston, and he promised them before the game, I don't care who it is, I'm fighting tonight, and I'm going to win. And he picked Connor Dewar. He asked him to fight. And then 4 nights later, he fights Brandon
Dewar was
Duhaime.
defending a teammate, though, too. I mean, but it was... And then it was Duhaime 4 nights later when they fought back here.
Probably defending Connor Dewar. Just saying, you can't, if you're going to fight my buddy, you're going to fight me. I'm trying to think. There was another thought that I had here on the team. I don't think we'll talk about Marcus Johansson again. Mm-hmm. You got my blood up on that one.
I'm worried about your blood pressure going into the season.
Yeah. God, what was it?
We are going to Pizziola Primo, though not your Italian place in Pittsburgh. We established that tonight.
Oh, yeah, we did. That was a big topic of conversation at the freaking practice today. Man, I had my fill of you at practice this morning, and
we only talked for about 45 seconds.
I know, but that was enough because I knew I had to come back here tonight and talk to you for an hour. God, there was one other thing I had on last night's game or somebody on the team. It'll come to me. But again, we have a microphone up here, and I gladly ask you to come on up and ask a question. If you do, you get a T-shirt. If you have gotten one of these T-shirts before, maybe leave it for somebody else to ask a question. But you could come on up right now. You don't need to be invited again. We're doing the raffle at the end of the show. October 30th is our next live show. We talked about Rossi. Eck is who I wanted to talk to you about. This guy. I just honestly, he's just such a magnificent hockey player. Like he just is. Like last night, he needless hit on Tyler Bertuzzi. No reason to do it. He leaves the game like he just popped his shoulder out of his socket. He must have just lost the win. Comes back out, and then he is just an absolute menace the rest of the game. He's just such an unreal player.
He's one of a kind.
As I've always said, by the way, on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Never mentioned that you should have drafted somebody else. I just think he is I can't think of another player in the NHL that's like him, but we were talking about this a little bit on the broadcast last night. What's been amazing to watch is for the first couple of years when some were saying that the Wild should have drafted somebody else, you kept looking at him thinking, okay, he's really a handful defensively, but he's just a ham and egg guy on offense. Like the puck has to hit him in the to go in the net. It's the only reason he scores is because he's willing to stand in the crease. And now all of a sudden, over the last 3 years, like last night, he made 2 or 3 plays with the puck that were. It's amazing to watch how his confidence with the puck has allowed him to. I think it's just confidence, where his game has just. it's gone to a new level. His puck skills are significant.
Yeah. And what I love about him, too, is his absolute maturity and professionalism. Like, he could come into camp right now being like, this is baloney that I'm not playing with Kirill Kaprizov. Like, I was unbelievable with him last year. And he's anything but. You put him on the second line, he could play with anybody. He could play with...
Yeah, I didn't even really think about that because it's so foreign to what you'd hear from him that it would never even cross his mind that I should be playing with those guys. It's just, well, if you asked him the question, I bet you'd get a blank stare like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it was.
I got Matt Boldy's on my wing. That's what I got.
Yep, exactly. And to be fair, one of his closest friends, Marcus. And they're from the same town. They skate together, all that stuff.
When it comes to great steaks, it's all about the marbling. And there's a 1 through 12 scale for marbling that will measure what the quality is of the steak. And for Feller's Ranch Wagyu, it's some of the best you'll find. They won't sell their steaks unless they're at a marbling level of 6 to 10 on a scale of 12. It's some of the best steaks you'll find. Just for reference, USDA Prime can be called USDA Prime as long as it's at 3 or 4 on that same scale. This steak is some of the best I've had. You can find it at fellersranch.com. Their vans are in the cities every week. They can deliver it to you. There are also a couple of spots within the cities where you can pick it up. You won't be disappointed. If you're having a great meal and you want to have steak, there's no place to go that's better than Feller's Ranch.
We do want to thank Twill and the Edina Galleria. I don't know if you've been to the Edina Galleria. It's a beautiful place to shop, a very comfortable place to shop, easy parking, easy in and out, really good restaurants there to hang out in if you want to do that. But if you walk by Twill, you'll see that the shop reflects their products. It's a very down-to-earth, easygoing, attractive space with expert associates working there who are not pushy at all. They're just there to answer your questions and help steer you in the right direction if you need steering. And you go in there and just walk by, get a look, and then go back when you want to buy clothes for yourself, when you buy somebody a present, whatever the case might be. Go in and realize that Scott Dayton handpicks everything in his shop. Scott Dayton's the proprietor. It is Twill by Scott Dayton. Scott's been a friend of mine and has been supporting this network for a long time. I buy all of my clothes there. My wife loves the place. Every time we go in there, we buy more than we expected to buy because my wife likes it so much. Their stuff fits. It wears well. I just went on a European vacation where everything I wore was from Twill because you get out of an 8-hour flight and you're not even wrinkled. The stuff just wears well. You can buy everything from golf, from running shoes, walking shoes, golf shorts to beautiful Italian suits that you can wear anywhere, to any occasion. So just check out twillmn.com, sign up for their email notifications. They will not spam you. They'll just send you something if they're going to have a special event.
Let's talk with the one thing that's what I wanted to talk to you about, Craig Leopold. So I mentioned that Joe and I had an exclusive interview with him 2 nights ago. And we'll have that in, I think, the October 9th Athletic. Really interesting story talking about the future of the Wild and things like that and the plan and all that. But, we talked to him a lot for that story, too, about Kirill Kaprizov, and he repeated a lot of what he said yesterday. And the one thing that is extremely clear is he understands, like you and I have talked about on this podcast a lot, that it's not just money that's going to drive this guy. He knows that everybody else can offer him the same contract minus 1 year. So, but what he knows is that they've got to convince him that he could be on a winner here long term. Because remember, when this contract kicks in, the 8-year deal that they're going to definitely offer him, he's going to be 29 years old. His clock is ticking. This isn't somebody that's 22 or 23. Matt Boldy could sign to 7 and still at Kirill Kaprizov's age get another 7-year deal. Where this is Kirill, if he's going to lock up somewhere for a long-term deal, he's going to want to know that he's got a chance.
This might be his last big deal.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
At the end of this contract, he isn't going to be the same player that he is.
So what I love is that Craig recognizes this, and Bill Guerin recognizes this, and they have a plan that they feel over the next some odd years, that they're going to be able to show him that they're a true contender on the team. I joked yesterday with that Zuccarello pass, which we've seen 1,000 times, not just in exhibition games, that, they should just give Zuki an 8-year extension too. Just have him go till 47. He'll probably still be able to make that pass. And at least then you make sure
he'll look like the same player.
If you tell Kirill Kaprizov, like, hey, we're going to re-sign you for 8 years, but Zuki's going to be here 8 years with you, it'll happen. But that ain't happening. But the other thing that Craig Leopold said, and this has never been an issue with Craig, because he has always spent to the max, or more to the max if you think about the amount of guys that he's paying $550,000 in the minors and the buyouts and all that stuff. But he said there's no negotiating games here. They're not going to you're going to take a hometown discount. You got to be Sidney Crosby, and take 8.7 when you probably deserve 12 or 13. Like, he knows that right now, Connor McDavid's going to get 16 or 17 on his next deal. Technically could get more. Leon Draisaitl could have taken it higher, but got $14 million, that they are probably going to have to offer him $12, $13 million a year. And the other thing that they have talked about a lot here is, and we've talked about on the show, is that Craig has long had this policy that Bill Guerin has essentially adhered to, is no signing bonuses. The only ones besides Parise and Suter that got little signing bonuses at parts in their contract, I think, was Spurgeon, but not like what you're seeing other guys get, where you might get a $10 million signing bonus and make $1 million in actual salary or things like that. And so he's going to have to join the big boys, and he acknowledges that. And he basically said yesterday that he's going to do that. So they're going to work their damnedest to get this done. But again, the question is going to be, what does Kirill want? Does he buy into the fact that this team has the best way of delivering him a cup, as opposed to the X amount of teams that might be coming after him in 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna make enough money. I think the other advantage the Wild have is that they can negotiate him with him 1 year before anybody else can. So that 1 year and that makes a difference. It isn't just to say, well, what difference does it make? Wait a year. Well, that's a year where what if you get injured?
Yes,
what if you get hurt? And so to be able to show him that 1 year before anybody else is a factor. Having a plan in place that looks like you have a chance to win certainly is a factor. And the fact that I don't think the Wild will get outbid by anybody is the third factor. So they get 2 of the 3 going their way no matter what. And I believe this team will look competitive enough this year where that question will be answered.
And don't think that for 1 minute that Craig Leopold, that wasn't orchestrated with Chicago in town for him to say, we are going to offer him more money than anybody else can, and for longer. That was him not only letting Kirill know it, not only letting the fans know it, but letting the other 31 teams around in the league know it, that if you are going to tamper here, we're telling you right now that we're coming at, we're going to try to sign our player, and you better not get in the way of that. Because there are ways of tampering that aren't illegal tampering, and one way is to hint, say to the media, hey, we're going after Kaprizov in a couple of years, and get that out there. So don't think that was not an orchestrated decision, because I know that report that we talked about last week that was since clarified by Mark Lazarus, my colleague at The Athletic. I could tell you internally at the Wild, we're not happy about it, and do believe that the Chicago Blackhawks in particular are basically floating out there, letting people know, like, hey, we're eyeballing this guy in a couple of years, and that I think is bothering him. We're 49 minutes into the show, and nobody has asked a question. I promise you, if you come up, I won't curse you out like Anthony. I only reserve that for Anthony.
If you delete that, by the way, then you're going to be fired as the producer.
No, you don't have to delete the cursing. You should probably bleep out. You could tell Davida, but man, did it feel good. All right, come on up.
And I can promise you, I won't cuss you out.
Do you ever curse, by the way? I don't think I've ever heard you swear.
I curse, just not at you or in public.
Yeah.
I'm a happy guy.
Yeah, that makes me upset too. Question, speaking to the mic.
So if the Wild decide to keep 3 goalies up with the club this year, does that take away a spot from a skater? And if so, who do you think that player is?
Well, it does, because you can only have 23 men on the roster. What it really does, in my eyes, is, that's a $925,000 cap hit. So what it does is, it's not just that it takes a spot away from a skater. it takes cap space away from even having extra guys. So like if Wallstedt, like if they have their roster right now and Wallstedt is on the team opening night, they can only afford one other extra like skater on the team, and that would have to be a league minimum guy.
Well, so. They can have two, but one, you're counting John Merrill as
yes,
a given.
Yeah, they
so
can put him on waivers.
Merrill's going to be on the team. So you have 7 defensemen right now. And then to Michael's point, if you have a third goalie, you can only have one more guy. Yeah. So that would
could be
would you
Jones,
have an 8th defenseman? Would it be Damon Hunt? Would it be Jones or Ogren as a forward? But yeah, you can only have 23.
Yeah, and I am doing this off the top of my head, so I don't have the cap space totally memorized. But the one thing I will say that like the Ogren Johansson debate was something else. With Damon Hunt, he would be the 7th D. So you're not, to me, it would make no sense. Unless you're having him on the team right now just to be on that road trip because you know that Middleton's leaving, it really makes sense for him to start in the minors because it makes no sense for him to just sit in the press box because he's not going to unseat any of the top 6D right now. So Merrill's perfect for that. So like all these, the fans that were commenting on my articles or tweets the other day when I put out the projected roster and basically said Hunt is close but might have to start in the minors. And they're like, well, just put John Merrill on waivers. I'm not saying that won't happen at some point, but really it makes no sense to do it now if Hunt's not going to be in your lineup because you don't want that young defenseman just sitting out. I mean, he needs to play games. So yeah, good question. Take a shirt. I was talking on your goalie question. You did strike me up. One thing I did talk to Flower today, which I can't remember if it was you or somebody else that said to me, whether it was you on a podcast or somebody else said to me, is it'll be interesting how Flower handles the 3 goalie situation because he loves to practice and he wants to be in the net. And I asked him about that today, and he said that's the only oddity of it is that. So he said it's going to take a lot of communication with Freddie, but it's going to be a lot of him going on the ice early and things like that. Because again, there's 2 nets, and if Gus is starting that next game, it is going to be Flower that's going to be the one that's alternating. So it's.
Remember the Rangers were in this spot a couple of years ago in Lundqvist, at the end of Lundqvist's career. They had 3 goalies and they figured it out. This isn't like the first time this has ever happened. It's rare, but it has happened before.
100%.
Couple things. Last night, what were your thoughts on Bedard? He scored, but he kind of looked pedestrian a little bit for his standard, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it was a weird game for them. They, I don't know. I mean,
how good was their lineup?
Their
lineup was good. Their
lineup was good. I mean, they were missing some guys. They were missing
not many.
I mean, Teravainen.
When I asked their broadcast, because they were frustrated last night because they brought mostly an NHL team.
The timeout too,
right? And so they were missing Brody and Martinez on the blue line, which they're for sure better than their third set last night. But when they said, we're missing a couple forwards, we're missing Teravainen and Donato. And it's like, well, you're missing Ryan Donato? I mean, how are you going to handle that? But, I like the guy, but I mean, it's not like he wouldn't even be on the radar here to be on the team. So that was their NHL team, and they got run over. Yeah. But I will say,
minus Mrazek too, right?
With Bedard, that's how he's looked against the Wild almost every time the Wild have played him. And there are little flashes. He releases the puck a couple times, and you're like, whoa, that's why everybody's excited. But in terms of the flow of the game, he doesn't dominate the game like Kaprizov did when he was a rookie, like Boldy even does sometimes now. It's just different. He's going to be a great player,
age,
for sure. Different age, no doubt.
Again,
no doubt.
Kaprizov was a 24-year-old rookie.
No doubt. But when you watch him, there aren't even shifts where he controls the game. It's just that when every once in a while the puck comes off his stick like a lightning bolt, and you say, well, that's different.
I really want to publicize this podcast in Chicago and get these Blackhawks fans off my ass and right onto yours. Because, man, when I say this stuff, And I mean, the guy, he did score 61 points last year in 65 or 66 games, but that's about what he. That's about what he's looked like every year. They need to have supporting cast around him in a couple years when they get Kaprizov. They will.
So, what's your predictions for the season? Do you think they're going to make the playoffs?
I am shocked at how low everybody's picking the Wild.
I think there are
teams
team
that are picking them seventh. Like I have seen like people, like a lot of people, it's ridiculous. Don't you? Like if they are healthy, like the one thing I will say, like I agree with you that their depth is better, but if they have the same type of injuries, yeah, they might be better equipped, but Travis Boyd ain't filling in for Joel Erickson.
If any of the like pick any team that you think is a contender in the Central and give them the injuries the Wild had last year, and they're not a playoff team.
Right.
Maybe Dallas, but you give Colorado Minnesota's injuries from last year, they don't make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Give Nashville Minnesota's injuries, they don't make the playoffs. St. Louis, Winnipeg, none of those teams have enough depth to withstand what the Wild did last year. So I think they're a playoff team. I think right now Dallas is different. Colorado's probably still different, but all the other teams, Nashville, Winnipeg, St. Louis, Minnesota, they all are about the same. And a couple of those teams are going to make, probably 3 of those teams will make it, and one of them won't.
I don't agree with you on Nashville. And I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, they got Philip Forsberg, who almost had 50 goals last year. They have the best defenseman in my eyes in the NHL in Roman Josi. They have a goaltender that's got to be better than he was last year in Saros.
He was so good down the stretch last year, though. And they just signed Marchessault,
Stamkos, Shea.
Yeah. I think they're better than they were last year. But last year, I thought Minnesota had a better roster than them when healthy. Minnesota's goaltending was just so miserable last year. If Minnesota gets average goaltending, they are a no-brainer playoff team. And I'm saying literally average. If they're middle of the NHL, they will be a playoff team.
See, and I'll pick the Wild 4th or 5th. Like I think that Nashville in the division, Nashville, Columbus, Nashville, Colorado, and Dallas are going to be the top 3, and then I put Minnesota there with Utah, St. Louis. St. Louis finished higher than them last year. I'm not a big St. Louis I don't think so either.
I think Utah's coming, but they're not there yet. Chicago will be better, but they're not there yet.
With Utah.
Right, but I'm in the same boat. I mean, I think they're probably on paper the 4th best team in the division, but I don't think the gap is very big between Minnesota, Nashville, and Colorado.
You know what I think is interesting? Like maybe I'll turn out to be wrong. Like I don't see any way that the Central Division doesn't put 5 teams in the playoffs, which is why I think the Wild have a real good chance of making the playoffs if they're healthy. Because I look at that division in the West, like obviously, like I'm really going to be interested to see what happens with LA this year, because LA at time, like remember they started it last year incredible on the road. I think 11 in a row. They were really good. Then they had to battle themselves to get in the playoffs after the coaching change. But look, now Doughty's hurt. They have Kemper and net. They really want to play a lot of their young kids because they're not being blocked out. So those guys are going to get some big time chances this year. Brant, Clark, and
I think there's 4 legit playoff contenders in the Pacific, and probably 3 make it for sure.
And Vancouver's got goaltending problems.
Vancouver's got issues with Demko hurt. But you got Vegas, Edmonton, LA, and Vancouver are really the only 4 that I think are legit.
The one team I think will
teams.
be better is Seattle. Like I think Seattle obviously took a dip last year, but they go get Brandon Montour, Chandler Stevenson, a new coach. I think they're going to be invigorated by that. But Vegas really could take a step back. Like
none of those teams,
and they finished 8th last year.
Right.
So, any other questions? You got to be some other questions. Here we go. Anthony's got nowhere to be.
I don't. My tea time was canceled.
What time are you golfing tomorrow? You got to make up for it.
Tomorrow I'm actually playing twice, early in the morning and then in the afternoon.
Oh, you're missing practice?
No, I'm going to practice in between.
Here you go. Hello.
Hi.
I like your hat.
Thank you. Yeah. What do you think Fleury's going to do after retirement?
Oh, man, that's so funny you asked that. I almost asked him today because I know that Bill Guerin really wants him to work in this organization in some capacity. He is building his dream home in Vegas. He is going to retire there. So, I think he's going to want to live there. But could you have him be a goalie consultant? There's got to be some capacity. I definitely think he wants to be a dad. But to be honest, I haven't asked him point blank. But I know that the Wild are really hoping that he is going to be in some capacity working in this organization in some way. So, but I don't know. I haven't asked him point blank. But it's so funny you brought that up because I almost asked him today because he was in such a relaxed mood. So,
he strikes me as a guy that wouldn't want to do anything halfway, though. So if he's living in Vegas, he doesn't seem like the type that would want to have a role where I just drop in for a week here or there. Yeah. He seems like he'd either want to be all in or not at all. Yeah, that's just 100% conjecture on my part. I've never talked to him about it either.
Yeah. You know that Bill Guerin's going to have a lot of conversations with him about him to try to convince him to do something. Maybe he'll just scout Vegas games or something. I don't know. Any other questions? Or are we wrapping up? We wrapping up for the, we'll do the raffle off the air. Well, thanks to everybody for coming out to Elsie's. Thanks for joining us in the Aquarius Home Services studio. Again, our next live show is October 30th at SplitRock. So then we believe our next two shows are November 4th and the 13th. Stay tuned to the sites of those shows. But I believe there will only be the options of Elsie's, SplitRocks, and Tuddles, although somebody that works at Talk North told me the other day that we might have a fourth option for live shows coming up as well. So stay tuned to our social media and to our podcast for that. We will be doing a show next week. I will be coming a little late to Anthony's house for that.
But that's a soft start time.
Yeah, and that will be 100% out of spite after this show. Thanks to our sponsors, Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, Royal Credit Union, and Feller's Ranch. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right.